I'm going to tell you about the day I walked outside to grab my mail and found two police cruisers rolling up my street like I'd turned my driveway into a crime scene. And the wild part is, it all started because I installed a gate. Not a monster gate, not a tacky keep-out situation, just a clean, matte black steel gate at the top of my driveway. The kind you barely notice unless you're the type of person who makes it their hobby to notice everything. If you've ever lived in an HOA neighborhood, you already know where this is going. If you haven't, buckle up, because this is the story of how one woman tried to bully me into tearing down something I built legally, quietly, and responsibly, and how she ended up humiliating herself so badly she practically evaporated from the neighborhood overnight. Act 1. The hook. You're not allowed to feel safe here. It's funny. I used to think the term neighborhood drama meant loud parties or someone's dog digging under fences. I didn't realize it could be paperwork, passive-aggressive emails, and a grown adult hiding behind a shrub with a tape measure. My name's Ethan. I live in a place called Redwood Hollow, a planned community just outside a mid-sized city in the South. It's one of those neighborhoods where every mailbox matches, every lawn is suspiciously green, and the Facebook group has more posts about suspicious vehicles than actual crime. My house sits at the end of a cul-de-sac, which sounds peaceful until you realize it makes my driveway long and curved, like a little private road. When I bought the place, I thought it was perfect. Quiet. A little tucked away. The kind of spot that makes you exhale when you pull in after a long day. Until the kids started using my driveway like a BMX course. At first it was harmless. A couple of bikes cutting through, a skateboarder testing the slope. But it kept escalating. Kids racing down at dusk, parents standing in the street laughing like my property was a public park. One day, I came home and found chalk drawings all over the concrete. Another day, a kid nearly slammed into my truck because he shot around the curve like he was auditioning for a stunt show. I'm not some grumpy old man. I get it, kids play. But I also didn't buy a house so strangers could treat my driveway like a shortcut. So after a few months of trying to be the nice guy and politely asking people to keep it off my property, I made a decision. I was going to put up a gate. Not to be dramatic. Not to be that guy. Just a simple barrier at the top where the driveway meets the street. Enough to say, kindly but clearly, hey, this is private. I did it by the book. I pulled a permit with the city. I hired a licensed contractor. I read the HOA guidelines, twice, like a student cramming for finals. The rules had plenty to say about fence height, visibility at corners, and how your shed can't look like you built it out of leftover pallets. But there was nothing that said, no driveway gates. Nothing. So I went ahead. The gate went in on a Thursday. It looked great, tasteful, clean lines. It actually made my property look more finished, like it belonged there. I thought the story would end right there. Spoiler, it did not. The next morning, I'm making coffee and I glance out my window, and there she is, standing across the street, arms crossed, staring at my gate like it personally offended her. Her name wasn't Karen, but spiritually, she was. In Redwood Hollow, everybody knew her as Marlene Whitaker. Marlene was the HOA president, the unofficial mayor, the person who always seemed to know who painted their shutters the wrong shade of beige. She wasn't just involved in HOA business. She was HOA business. She had that look, too, the one that says, I'm smiling, but I'm also mentally writing a complaint. I tried to ignore it. I told myself, she's just curious. People notice changes. No big deal. 3 days later, I got an email from the HOA. The subject line was something cheery, like community updates and friendly reminders. The first part was about a spring picnic. The second part was about trash cans. Then at the bottom, like a little poison dart, there was a paragraph. Please remember that all exterior modifications must be approved by the Architectural Review Committee. Failure to obtain prior approval may result in fines. My stomach did that small drop. Because I had checked. There was nothing that said I needed approval for a gate that met the requirements. Still, I didn't panic. I replied politely. I attached the permit. I attached a photo. I even attached screenshots of the relevant HOA sections. I said, hey, just confirming I'm in compliance. Let me know if you need anything else. No response. Then the notices started. A letter taped to my mailbox. Unapproved structure. Violation. No specifics. No rule cited. Just a bold threat that I had 14 days to remedy the issue. 2 days later, another letter appeared. this time mentioning a $750 fine. That's when I realized this wasn't confusion. This was targeting. And the weirdest part? I hadn't even spoken to Marlene. Not once. But suddenly it felt like she had decided I was a problem she needed to solve. Act 2. The climb. If you don't fold, they escalate. I'm going to be honest with you. In the past, I would have folded. I've been the guy who keeps the peace. The guy who apologizes when he's not wrong. The guy who hears a louder voice and immediately assumes it must be right. I grew up learning that if someone is confident enough, you don't question them. You just get out of the way. And HOA people like Marlene thrive on that. They bank on the fact that most folks don't want to fight. But something about the way this was happening, the vagueness, the silence, the threats, it lit this stubborn little flame in me. Because I knew I was right. And I was tired of being treated like a kid who needed permission to exist in his own home. So I went to the next HOA meeting. It was in the community center, fluorescent lights humming like a courtroom. Marlene was at the head of the table with a thick binder, smiling like she'd been waiting for me. I raised my hand and said, "Can we talk about the violation notices I've been getting about my gate?" She did this sweet little laugh and said, "Oh, Ethan, we're just trying to keep the neighborhood cohesive, you understand. That gate doesn't really fit the community aesthetic." I blinked. Aesthetic, I repeated, like I was tasting the word. It's a black steel gate. There are at least 2 other homes with gates. Her smile twitched, just for a second. "Those are older," she said quickly. "They're considered legacy installations. Yours is new, and it creates a closed-off impression." "Closed off," I said, looking around the room. "It's literally at the top of my driveway." A couple neighbors nodded, like they weren't sure why this was even a meeting topic. One guy, Greg, shrugged and said, "Honestly, it looks fine." Another woman said, "I like it. It's clean." Marlene's face tightened. "This is not a popularity contest," she snapped. "It's about standards." I leaned forward, calm but firm. "Then show me the standard I violated." She flipped through her binder like she was looking for a magic spell. Page after page. Nothing. She finally said, "We'll need to review the bylaws more thoroughly." Translation, I've got nothing, but I'm not backing down. After that meeting, things got creepier. Marlene started appearing near my property like she was orbiting it. I'd be taking my trash out, and she'd be walking her dog directly across from my driveway, staring. One afternoon I'm mowing, and she slows her car down like she's doing a drive-by inspection. She actually rolled her window down and said, "You know, the HOA is getting serious about enforcement. You may want to remove that gate before this escalates." I turned off the mower and looked at her. "Escalates to what?" She smiled tight. "Just trying to help." And she drove off. That's when it clicked for me. This wasn't about rules. This was about control. She didn't like that I did something without asking her first, and now she needed to win. So I did what she didn't expect. I studied the documents like my mortgage depended on it. I reread the HOA guidelines and the city permit regulations. I printed the relevant sections. I highlighted them. The rules said exterior changes required HOA review only if they exceeded certain height limits or blocked visibility. My gate was under the limit and set back far enough that you could see everything you needed to see. It was fully inside my property line. Legally and technically, I was solid. I sent an email to the entire HOA board, not just the generic address. I attached everything. I said, politely but clearly, "I'm not removing a permitted structure that does not violate any written rule. If you believe otherwise, please cite the exact clause." You know what I got back? Silence. The next morning, I catch Marlene in my front area with a tape measure. Like a cartoon villain. She jumped when she saw me, then tried to act casual. "Oh," she said, "I was just checking the easement, making sure the gate isn't obstructing public access." I laughed, because it was either laugh or scream. "Marlene," I said, "my permit includes the property boundary measurements." She waved a hand like she didn't care. "We have to protect property values." Then she walked away like she'd just solved a case. I stood there thinking, this is a grown woman. This is a grown woman with time, a tape measure, and a mission. Then came the police. Saturday morning, sun out, birds doing their little soundtrack thing. I walk outside to grab my mail, and I see 2 cruisers parked down the street. My first thought is, someone's in trouble. My second thought, and I swear this popped into my head like a cold splash. Oh no, she didn't. The officers approached my driveway, calm but serious. One of them says, "Sir, we got a report about a structure blocking public access." I almost laughed right in his face, but I caught myself. "You mean my gate?" I asked. "The one inside my property line?" He gave me that tired look cops get when they already know the call is nonsense, but they still have to follow up. "We just need to check." I walked them over. I showed them the permit. I pointed to the survey markers. I even pulled up the email from the city inspector who signed off. The younger officer nodded and said, "Yeah, you're fine." The older one sighed and said, "Sorry about this." And then, like a cherry on top, he looked across the street. Because Marlene was standing there, phone in hand, pretending she wasn't watching. I said, "You might want to talk to her." The older officer crossed the street. I couldn't hear everything, but I watched Marlene's body language change in real time, from confident to flustered. She pulled out papers like she was presenting a case on a courtroom show. She gestured dramatically at my driveway. The officer listened for a minute, then said something that made her go still. Her face went red. She stopped talking. The officer turned around and walked back to his car. 10 seconds later, both cruisers left, and Marlene just stood there, frozen, like she'd been slapped by reality. I thought that would be the end. I really did. But bullies don't stop when they lose once. They stop when losing starts costing them something. Act 3, the payoff. The mask slips, and everyone finally sees it. A few days later, the HOA blasted out an urgent neighborhood meeting email about recent compliance concerns. No names mentioned, but I could feel my name in the air. I showed up. Marlene was already there with her binder, sitting like a queen on trial day. The room was tense. People were whispering. It felt less like an HOA meeting and more like a town showdown. Marlene launched into a speech about community harmony and standards. She didn't mention my gate at first, just built suspense like a bad actor. Then she turned, looked right at me, and said, "We have an issue with an unauthorized installation that sets a dangerous precedent." I raised my hand. "You mean my gate?" She narrowed her eyes. "If the shoe fits." I smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "Great. Let's do this properly. What rule am I violating?" She opened her binder and started flipping. The pages sounded loud in that quiet room. One neighbor, a retired guy named Walt, finally said, "Marlene, do you actually have a clause?" Another woman said, "This is getting ridiculous." Marlene snapped, "It's not ridiculous to protect property values." I leaned back and said, "It's ridiculous to invent rules after the fact." Someone laughed. Not me. Somebody else. And that laugh was like a crack in a dam. People started speaking up. "It looks nice. I don't see the issue. Why are we wasting time on this?" Marlene's face tightened more and more until it looked like it physically hurt to keep smiling. The board ended up dropping the violation. One of the board members, a calm woman named Denise, apologized to me after the meeting in a low voice. "She's not used to people pushing back," she said. "Most folks just comply." I nodded. "Yeah," I said. "I used to be one of those folks." Now here's where the story takes a turn from petty to unhinged. About a week later, Walt comes to my house and says, "Hey, have you seen anyone around your driveway at night?" My stomach sank. That's not a normal sentence. I hadn't, but I didn't like the idea. So I installed a motion-activated camera pointed at the gate. I expected raccoons. I got a Halloween special. On the third night, the camera caught a figure creeping up in dark clothes, flashlights scanning the gate like they were hunting for evidence. Then the person grabbed the gate and tugged on it. Hard. Like if they pulled enough times, reality would bend and the gate would just vanish. The person stepped into the light just enough for the camera to catch her face. Marlene, the HOA president, in black, sneaking around my property like a bargain bin spy movie. I stared at the footage for a long minute, not even angry at first, just stunned. Like my brain couldn't compute the level of adult insanity happening in front of me. Then I felt it. That heat in your chest when you realize someone has been treating you like you're less than human, like you're a target, not a neighbor. I sent the clip to Denise with one sentence. "I think the board should see this." Denise called me within an hour, half shocked, half trying not to laugh. "Ethan," she said, "you're not going to believe what we just found out. Marlene has been issuing violation notices without board approval. She's been using the HOA letterhead like it's her personal weapon." That explained the silence. That explained the vagueness. She wasn't confused. She was freelancing. That night, the board held a private meeting. I wasn't there, but Walt texted me updates like he was live tweeting a courtroom drama. She's freaking out, he wrote. Denise is asking her why she called the cops. Then, now she's saying you forged your permits. I literally said, out loud in my kitchen, of course she is. Then Walt sent. She brought documents as evidence. Denise says they look fake. A minute later, Denise just called the city planning office on speaker. They confirmed your permits are legit. Then the best one, Marlene is yelling about property values again. Board members are rolling their eyes. According to Walt, Marlene tried to double down, tried to frame herself as the hero, the only one brave enough to stand up to the villain with the evil gate. But her mask was slipping, and everyone could see it. Denise brought up the camera footage. Someone asked why she was on my property at night. Marlene started shouting about investigations and community threats like she was the sheriff of a fake town. That's when the board did something I didn't expect. They voted to remove her as president. Unanimously. No debate. No hesitation. Just done. Walt texted me. She stormed out and slammed the door so hard the sign on the wall shook. I sat there staring at my phone, feeling this weird mix of relief and sadness. Because I didn't want to ruin someone. I just wanted to stop being pushed. But when someone keeps escalating, eventually the consequences catch up. The next day, an official HOA email went out. Not vague, not passive-aggressive. Official. It said the violation notices were nullified, it apologized for the harassment, and it confirmed my gate was compliant. Denise even came by in person, looked me in the eye, and said, "I'm sorry. This should never have happened." A few weeks later, I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that Marlene put her house on the market. Some people said she needed a fresh start. Some people said she couldn't handle being the villain in her own story. I never saw her again. One day her porch lights were off, her windows were empty, and it was like she'd been erased. And my gate is still there. Every time I pull in, I look at it, and I smile. Not because I won some petty fight, but because it reminds me of something I wish I'd learned sooner. You can be polite without being powerless. You can be kind without being a doormat. And sometimes, the only thing that stops a bully is the moment you calmly say, "No. Show me the rule." Now here's the part that's going to make people argue in the comments. Because I can already hear it. Some folks are going to say, HOAs exist for a reason. Rules are rules. And I agree, to a point. But what happens when the rules aren't the real issue? What happens when someone uses community standards as a disguise for ego, control, and personal vendettas? What happens when the system designed to keep things fair becomes a weapon in the hands of the loudest person in the room? So I want to ask you straight. Was I right to push back, even if it embarrassed her publicly, or should I have just complied to keep the peace? And if you've ever lived under an HOA, tell me the craziest power trip you've witnessed. Was it over a fence, a car, a flag, a flower pot, something ridiculous that turned into a full-blown war? Drop your story below, because I swear these neighborhoods are full of quiet little dramas that nobody talks about until they explode. And if this story hit a nerve, if you've ever been underestimated, bullied, or treated like you don't get a say in your own life, do me a favor, like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. We're building a space here where people tell the truth about power, fairness, and what it really takes to stand up for yourself when everyone expects you to fold. Now go ahead. Tell me in the comments who was right, who was wrong, and what you would have done if you were in my shoes.